In the quiet, unsuspecting town of Plainfield, Wisconsin, the boundaries between reality and horror blur in a tale so disturbing, it not only rocked the local community but cast a long shadow over the entire world of horror storytelling. Imagine someone so twisted that their life became the very inspiration for some of your most chilling nightmares. You might be wondering how one man's heinous acts not only shocked a nation but also spawned entire genres of terrifying films and books. What dark recesses of the mind led Ed Gein to become the nightmare that inspired iconic horrors like Psycho and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre? Stick around, because what comes next will definitely leave you speechless. Let's dive into the chilling abyss of reality that is Ed Gein, a name that may not be familiar to some, but whose legacy persists in the nightmares of many. In a world where fiction often mirrors the grotesque facets of reality, the narratives we consume owe a hidden debt to individuals whose lives went horrifyingly off the rails. Ed Gein wasn't just a murderer, he was a grave robber, a body snatcher, and more profoundly, a participant in a grotesque ritual, a montage of his tormented psyche spilling over into a sinister reality. Born on August 27, 1906, in La Crosse, Wisconsin, Gein had the misfortune of being raised in a home that could be described as anything but nurturing. His father was an alcoholic and a harsh, domineering presence, and his mother, Augusta, was an overly religious woman who instilled in young Ed an obsession with death and a warped view of morality. You might wonder how such an upbringing could influence a person, leaving scars deeper than flesh and shaping a soul that would become infamous. Augmented by isolation and ridicule, Ed's formative years were wrapped in a suffocating blanket of his mother's extreme beliefs, leading to a profound psychological disturbance that many could only speculate about. As we reveal the layers of Ed Gein's tragic and twisted life, it's important to recognize the fragility of the human mind. How much torment can one person endure before they break? Gein's eventual descent into the macabre was not a sudden leap. It was a slow, sinister evolution. His mother's death in 1945, a loss riddled with complicated emotions and residual pathologies, marks a pivotal moment in Ed's life. With Augusta gone, he was left alone in that old farmhouse, surrounded by her haunting presence and a collection of twisted artifacts that only served to fuel his deranged fantasies. It's no surprise that his subsequent actions would echo this chaotic upbringing. Ed began his gruesome excursions to local graveyards, digging up corpses of recently buried women who reminded him of his mother. You might find it hard to imagine the depths of despair that could push a human being into such depravity. As if in a grotesque homage to his mother, Ed sought to preserve them, creating a chilling effigy of the woman he had lost, a warped symbol of affection born from his fractured psyche. Over time, he transformed this necromantic obsession into something far more horrifying. Consider this: what happens when a mind so malleable is steeped in notions of identity, loss, and the relentless grasp of mortality? For Ed, it manifested itself in a morbid way that defies conventional understanding. His modest farmhouse became a real-life horror show, akin to the very films he would unwittingly inspire. As the authorities would discover later, his home was a macabre museum decorated with human remains. From skulls used as soup bowls to skin crafted into clothing, the breadth of Gein's grotesque creativity boggles the mind. Now, isn't it fascinating, or perhaps terrifying, to think how such a disturbing figure could lead to notable horror icons? Many horror movies feature demented characters who stalk their victims or hide in the shadows. But did you know that these character tropes are often grounded in real-life monsters like Gein? His chilling narrative poured into the veins of horror fiction, transforming into narratives we now recognize as classic. With characters that bore resemblances to Gein, like Norman Bates in Psycho or Leatherface in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, he became an unwitting inspiration for a genre that feeds on fear. What's equally haunting is how our fascination with such figures speaks volumes about our society. In a way, Gein's life story opened a Pandora's box of fears surrounding mental illness, isolation, and the horrors that lurk in ordinary places. You might be wondering, can understanding the origin of such terrifying realities help us grapple with our fears, or does it only serve to magnify them? The psychological impact of learning about Ed Gein continues to resonate, highlighting a morbid curiosity that challenges us. What is it within each of us that draws us to the dark side, to want to understand something so disturbing yet real? And while Gein's reclusiveness kept him under the radar for years, it wasn't until the late 1950s that the true monstrosity of his activities came to light. In 1957, following the disappearance of a local woman named Bernice Wardens, the police finally began to piece together the puzzle of Gein's crimes. What plays out next is a chilling confluence of horror and reality, as they discovered not just the body of Wardens, who was found in a murderously grisly state, but also a house that looked more like a set from a horror movie than a home. In a story that reads like fiction, the authorities walked into Ed's house to uncover a treasure trove of lunacy. The sight that greeted them was indescribable: grotesque trophies crafted from human remains, mummified heads hanging from the walls, and furniture made from human bones. Can you picture the shock and horror on the faces of those officers, stepping into what could only be described as hell on earth? Through this lens, we begin to see the moral ambiguity of our fascination with horror. Why are we so drawn to tales like this? Perhaps they serve as a cautionary reminder, a way to distance ourselves from what we consider to be other, while simultaneously dragging us closer to understanding that darkness lurks in us all. Each chilling detail unveiled about Gein only solidifies the connection between the fears we conjure in our imaginations and the terrifying realities of life. Is it any wonder that society continues to create narratives around such figures, all while grappling with our fear, our repulsion, and, perhaps, an insatiable curiosity? So, what happens next? How do we disentangle ourselves from the morbid narratives perpetuated by our fascination with Ed Gein and others like him? Stay tuned as we delve deeper into the startling implications of his actions, the media frenzy that ensued, and the lasting impact on horror films that continues to disturb our dreams today. In the next segment, we'll explore how Gein's legacy as horror's ultimate archetype not only shaped cinema but has also transformed popular perceptions of madness and the human condition. Keep watching, because the haunting truths behind Ed Gein and his terrifying inspirations are far from over. From the cultural ramifications to the psychological explorations of the mind, we're just beginning to peel back the layers of this nightmarish tale. What's next may just change the way you perceive horror, as well as the echoes of Ed Gein that resonate through the tales we tell today. As we dive deeper into the unnerving legacy of Ed Gein, it's crucial to consider how his case reverberated throughout the media landscape of the time. The gruesome details of Gein's crimes quickly became sensationalized, turning him into a household name almost instantaneously. The press, hungry for a captivating story, painted a picture of him as the quintessential monster, a label that undoubtedly contributed to the growing fusion of real crime with the horror genre in literature and film. In the months that followed Gein's crimes becoming public knowledge, headlines across America reverberated with shock and horror. Newspapers broadcasted stories that fascinated and horrified, inviting readers into the twisted labyrinth of Gein's mind. Phrases like "the Butcher of Plainfield" saturated discussions, positioning Gein not merely as a murderer but as a monstrous figure whose heart twisted with malice. He was a manifestation of societal fears, something that lurked just behind normalcy, waiting to break through. This concentrated media attention didn't just strip him of any semblance of a normal life, it transformed his grotesque actions into a fetishized spectacle that deeply rooted itself in the psyche of the nation. What is it within our collective consciousness that makes us so macabrely curious about serial killers? Perhaps it's the contradiction that such figures present, the intertwining of the ordinary and the monstrous. Ed Gein seemed like any other man on the surface, yet behind closed doors lay a shocking tapestry of horror that shattered the bedrock of decency. This paradox leads us to interrogate our relationship with fear. Does confronting the darker aspects of humanity provide us not only a thrill but also a moment of reflection on our mortality? The obsession only grew, and soon, the narrative of the living horror expanded across all forms of media. Books on true crime began to sprout like weeds, and horror films were fundamentally reshaped by his story. Psycho, directed by Alfred Hitchcock, is arguably one of the most notable films to emerge from Gein's narrative. The character of Norman Bates, a tormented figure driven by a complicated relationship with his mother, walks a fine line between victim and perpetrator. Through Bates, audiences could glimpse the psychological scars left by familial trauma, much like Gein's own life. The film's chilling portrayal of madness resonated so well that many were left to ponder not just Bates's sanity, but the hidden darkness within themselves. Yet if Ed Gein's legacy ended with Hitchcock's film, it might have been easier to distill the lessons drawn from this horror into discrete categories of good and evil. But Gein's malice seeped far deeper into the creative world. Tobe Hooper's The Texas Chainsaw Massacre introduced audiences to Leatherface, a distorted figure whose chainsaw-wielding antics echoed Gein's own grotesque practices. These characters weren't just actors dressed as monsters, they symbolized the fear that anyone could wear a normal facade while harboring horror within. This cultural evolution begs the question, how do we, as consumers of horror, navigate our appetite for the morbidly fascinating without losing sight of the humanity behind the tragedy? From Gein's story, we learn not only about the darkly twisted nature inherent in some individuals but also the biopsychosocial factors that might push someone over the edge. Can understanding these layers keep us from falling into the abyss ourselves, or does it merely render us complicit in the horrifying spectacle? Echoing this dilemma, the psychology behind Gein's actions fascinates yet repulses. Renowned psychiatrist Dr. Carl Jung posited the concept of the shadow, suggesting that within each person lies the darker aspects of the self, those untamed impulses and forbidden passions. Ed Gein's life serves as an unsettling reminder of what happens when the shadow goes unacknowledged, festering and growing until it bursts forth with uncontainable horror. The moral quandary then becomes, are we obliged to confront our own darkness, or is it safer to shun it? What further complicates our exploration of Gein is the profound and oftentimes exploitative nature of how societies respond to horror. While undoubtedly, Gein has become a pivotal figure in horror storytelling, his exploitation at the hands of the media raises ethical questions. Is it right to draw entertainment from the tragedies of others? Can the retelling of his stories serve as both a cautionary tale and a sensationalized travesty? While we analyze the art stemming from horror, we must confront these ethical implications that linger in the shadows of popular culture. To truly grasp the ripples created by Gein's existence, it's vital to assess how various adaptations have altered perceptions of mental health, violence, and male behavior over the decades. As society seeks to understand the motivations behind such behaviors, the narrative often skews toward mythologizing the figure, contributing to a cycle that elevates real monsters into the arena of quasi-celebrities. Then, we confront the question of legacy. What, exactly, does Ed Gein symbolize today? His life serves as a dark template that reflects our deepest anxieties, and the horror genre has woven his effective threads into a broader tapestry of filth and fear. From the unthinkable elements of body harvesting to the stark realization that isolation can warp reality, Gein reminds us of the fragile balance between sanity and madness. In our pursuit of understanding, the subsequent portrayal of Gein in pop culture provides a double-edged sword. Films and television shows frequently resurrect his image in new narratives, often glossing over the humanity and tragedy involved. While this enables a deeper exploration into social fears surrounding isolation and violence, it also risks trivializing the real-life pain and devastation wrought by his actions, reinforcing the idea that horror can be a commodity stripped of its original context. As we distill the echoes of Ed Gein's life into comprehensible narratives, we are left to assess where to go from here as society. Awareness of mental health issues, the need for compassion, and the moral obligations surrounding crime narratives are questions still relevant today, one that challenges viewers of horror to not just revel in the gruesome, but also recognize the fragility of life beneath such dark surfaces. The legacy of Ed Gein, encapsulated in fear-driven narratives, invites the audience to contemplate how the grotesque intertwines with the human experience. It serves as a harbinger of the horrors that lie within all of us, a proposition so chilling it forces us to consider not only what monsters exist in the world but what monstrous shadows lurk beneath our own skins. In conclusion, understanding Ed Gein's impact extends far beyond the realm of horror. It challenges us to confront notions of evil, trauma, and the delicate balance between sanity and madness. As we unpack this tangled web of influence, we find that the truths surrounding figures like Gein resonate deeply in the human experience. They beckon us to look inward, recognize our shared vulnerabilities, and ultimately navigate the darkness that exists not just in the world around us but within ourselves. Horror may never disappear, but through stories we tell and the lessons we learn, we can aim to transform our nightmares into reflections that enrich our understanding of the intricate tapestry of human existence. The echoes of Ed Gein will persist, not as a celebration of terror but as poignant reminders of the fragile line between the ordinary and the extraordinary darkness that can arise when humanity falters.